Ramya, thank you so much for joining us in the storytelling by and for adults session here on Monday, November 7, 2022. Please introduce yourself fully and tell us about your work and please tell us a story.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Ramya Srinidhi. I'm from Bangalore, India, and I think I'm a very blessed and a fortunate person to whom stories happen. So I'm happy to call myself a storyteller. Um, the story that I'm sharing today is a personal experience story, and my story title is When It Is Your Time. I have been married for over 15 years now. Many things have changed since then, but there's one routine, one ritual that has never changed. My morning calls to my parents' house. It was my father who used to receive my calls in the morning. So an enthusiastic "Hello, Appa" would always be reciprocated with a warm and caring "Hello, Ma, good morning." In my own flow of things, I would say, "So, Appa, what's for breakfast? What are you doing?" Ah, first tell me good morning, my father would insist. Okay, Appa, good morning. And that would be the beginning of our conversation. My father was an early riser. He would wake up probably at 5 or 6 in the morning, finish his morning walk, his little bit of exercise, walk up to the milk booth, get the milk, make his cup of coffee, and sit down with the morning newspaper. So by the time I called home, he would have probably finished scanning the newspaper once, and it would be his second or third round. So invariably, I would get a sneak peek into what was happening in and around the world. We would always come and stop at his favorite section in the newspaper, the speaking tree. Ma, do you know what is, there's an excellent article, Ma, in today's speaking tree. If you have a minute, let me tell you how to live your life with peace and happiness. Do you have some time? My father would ask. Most of my calls to my parents' house would either be when I was cooking or packing lunch for my children, or sometimes when I was driving. But still, I would say, yes, Appa, I have some time. Go ahead. He would either read the entire article or give me a gist or his version or his take on what was written in this article. I used to enjoy these conversations with my father. Well, of course, the afternoon and evening calls was dedicated to my mother and all the gossip and gupshops. It was a pleasant Sunday morning, 20th December 2020. As usual, I called my parents' house in the morning. My father picked up the phone, but the voice on the other side was a little feeble. Hello, Appa, good morning. Dad, are you all right? Why is your voice like this? I inquired. Do you know the weather? It's so cold outside, just a regular cough and cold. I'm taking some Ayurvedic medicines and I'll be fine, said my father. Well, wait, do you have a minute? There's an excellent article in today's speaking tree. The title says, When It Is Your Time. I said, Appa, wait. I cut him right there and I said, it's Sunday morning, Dad. I have to take Abhi to a class. He's with me. Why don't I just drop him and I'll call you back? Then I can sit down peacefully and listen to this article. Is that okay? I asked. Of course, Ma. You carry on. You finish your work and you can call me, he said, and we cut the call. By the time I came back and I could return the call, it was almost evening and my mother picked up the phone. She said father was still having cough and cold and a slight temperature had picked up, but he had taken some medications for fever and he should be okay by tomorrow. The next morning, as eager as I was, I called up home. However, the voice on the other side was that of my mother. She said father was still in bed. He had not woken up. There was some cough and cold and the fever had come back. Appa was still asleep. That was a big red flag for me. I immediately took an appointment with the doctor and I rushed home. My dad, who was still sleeping, woke up and said, "What nonsense." He brushed away all my concern and said, "It's just a common cough, cold, and fever, and I'll be fine. No need to see the doctor," he said. Well, that's when I used my trump card. Appa, the appointment is with Dr. Nalini. Well, Dr. Nalini was a very senior doctor, somebody my father held with very high respect and regard, and he would never miss an appointment with Dr. Nalini and keep her waiting. So he got up, we went to the doctor, she did the regular checkup, and she said, could be a regular viral, but just in case, just because, the pandemic is everywhere, just do a COVID test, she said. Well, that would be the third time my father was giving his COVID sample since the pandemic had broken. And every time the result was negative, he gave a sample. I dropped him back home with some cough syrups and cold medications and the usual instructions to take some steam inhalation and stuff like that. And I went back home. That night, it was around 12, when a series of messages came on my mobile phone and I woke up with a startle. When I checked my phone, all the messages were from Government of Karnataka. The COVID sample for the SPF number so and so has been tested positive. We advise you to be in complete isolation and take medical care. My heart sank. My father had tested COVID positive. Of course, I did not call home that night, but I didn't sleep well at all. First thing in the morning, I called the doctor. She advised me that I should take him to the hospital. When I rushed home, I told my father that we had to go to the hospital. I quickly took him to the hospital where they had an emergency booth set up for COVID patients. The nurse checked his vitals, his oxygen, and she said his oxygen level was fine. He was at 98 and everything seems okay. Just let him be at home, stay isolated, a lot of fluids, steam inhalation, zinc tablets, and Dolo for fever. He should be fine. Well, that was good. We came back home and I dropped my father. Well, the next day was 24th December. And this was one day in the entire year that I would never call up home. I would go there in person to take the blessings of my parents because it was my birthday. I cooked some food, took some sweets, and quickly went home. My father was looking very tired. He was still in bed. He got up, he gave me his blessings, but refused to eat any sweets as his throat was hurting. He just had a glass of porridge. When I checked his oxygen, it was around 97, but that was still okay. And I went back home. By afternoon, it was at 95 and it was coming down. It was around 7 in the evening when his oxygen levels had come to 94. The doctor advised me to take him to the hospital immediately. And I again rushed back home. This time when I told my dad that we had to go, he nodded his head. He got out of his bed. He went straight to the mirror, picked up a comb from the shelf, combed his hair. He straightened out all the creases that was there on his shirt. And he slowly walked up to his study table. A table where I used to see my father most of the time when I went home with his spectacles, with a table lamp, probably writing, reading, or making some notes. On the table, there was a blue color file. He went up to that file and he gently placed his hand on that file, looked at me and nodded his head, signaling that we could leave. I came outside, my dad waved at my mother, and we walked up to the car. Well, in my car, there was one thumb rule. Irrespective of who was behind the wheel, whether it was me or my husband, my father always got the seat next to the driver, always the front seat. It was a mark of respect and honor for him to sit in the front seat. But today, I, who was already wearing gloves and mask and face shield, opened the back door for him. My father slowly walked up. He looked at me, gracefully as it were, just quietly sat behind, put his head back and closed his eyes. I closed the door. We drove very quickly and quietly to the hospital. At the emergency in the hospital, they checked his vitals, and it was almost around 80. The doctor said that the oxygen level that he was in needed immediate medical attention, and he had to be taken to the intensive care unit. My dad was taken inside, and I was at the reception doing some paperwork. It was almost 10 in the night by now. The nurse at the reception told me that he was now taken to the 7th floor ICU unit. I quickly rushed to the 7th floor, and my dad was slowly being rolled out of the elevator. The man who held very high position, an administrative position in an esteemed educational institution, the man who always wore iron shirt even while at home, was now lying down in a stretcher in pale blue hospital clothes above the bed. As they rolled him closer to the ICU unit, I ran closer and I kept my gloved hands on his hand, and I said, "Appa, you'll be okay. Don't worry, you'll be fine, and I'll be taking you back home, and this time you will be in the front seat of my car. And remember that article that you mentioned that day. You still haven't read that article to me, and I will be waiting to listen to you." The minute I mentioned that article, my dad smiled. He smiled, he nodded his head, and he said, And soon he was rolled. He was just taken behind those huge glass doors into the intensive care unit. For the next 7 to 8 days, he finally gave up. On 2nd January, my father passed away. For the next few days, I continued to stay at my parents' house, and we wanted some of my father's documents for some paperwork. For the first time after he had left, I opened that door and walked into his room. It was as if time had come to a standstill in that room. Everything was just the way it was when he had left. I did not know where to look because my father was very touchy and very protective about all his papers. He thought we were all very careless and we would mess things up. Even my mother was not allowed to touch any of his papers. Lost as I was, when I was looking around, the blue file on his table caught my attention. The same file that my father had placed his hand just before leaving. I went close to the file, pulled my chair, and sat down at the table. And I slowly opened the file. On top, there was a paper cutting, an article, and the title was in bold, and it said, when it is your time, exit gracefully. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you for telling. So the story really is the celebration of you and your father and the loving relationship you had with him.
Yes. Yes.
Sherry?
Thank you very much. That was so touching. What a beautiful relationship you had with your father. The pandemic has been very hard on many of us. And I've not lost anyone to COVID, but I've lost both my daughter-in-law and my brother to cancers during this time. So I sympathize with you, and your composure and your telling is so beautiful. And I'm sitting here weeping away. Thank you for sharing.
June?
Oh, you did such a wonderful job of characterizing your relationship that as you told the story, that I could feel my tension going up and up. I kind of knew what was coming, and I was feeling so bad. And at the end, your loss of that wonderful relationship you had, and you have a beautiful voice, and you told that so well. You told a tragedy, but and even though we felt it, you sort of didn't scare us so much that we couldn't stay with you. Thank you very much.
I really have to thank Eric. I'm very grateful to Eric because when I was to tell the story here, I just reached out to him and I said, Eric, do you suggest what story should I tell? And personal narrative is not at all my favorite genre. I always think what is there that I can tell. But Eric pushed me and he said, why don't you tell a personal narrative? And I'm like, why is he even asking me to say that? I don't have a story. But then I felt the story was there and it needed to be told. And after that, everything just fell in place and the story just happened. And thank you very much, Eric, for pushing me to tell a personal narrative.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Carol?
Yeah, by focusing so much, it was so lovely by focusing on his life and your connection. It made it not maudlin or trying to manipulate us into, oh, you poor girl. Instead, it was like, what a loss and what riches, but it was the riches. And there's a writer, I'm sorry, her name is vanishing, but she said the loss of our parents is the river of sorrow we all must cross, So lovely. It was just lovely.
It was just wonderful.
He was a wonderful man, and I'm so proud. And
yes,
he did exit gracefully.
It sounds like he was graceful his whole life.
He was. He totally was.
Marina, is your hand up?
Yes, my hand is up. I don't know what happens to my, it says that you have closed my video somehow.
Can you turn your video on?
I've tried, but it says that you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Here, now I've just asked you to start your video. Let's see if that works. Did you get a message?
Yeah.
There you go. Good.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, thank you very much for your story. beautiful story. And I think also, just like the lady before me told, that the way you told the story, you were really, you were not crying, you made us cry, you made us, you made us feel, you showed the beautiful pictures, beautiful colors, you made us be in the story, you made us be with you and your relationship with your father. And even into the end, there was no sentiment in the way you told it. And I think that was very excellent, the way you did it. And so it's like we all, or at least I can see the colors, I can see your father, I can be with you and your father, and the beautiful life, the beautiful memories that you had in your life. And that is how he will live. He will continue to live. And I think that was very, 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 very well told. Very well temperated and everything. Excellent. And this, the end, the last meanings that you wrote from that blue. So thank you. Very good.
It was bittersweet because the bitterness of losing your father was countered by the sweetness and joy of the love between the two of you.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Ramya, this was beautiful, and I'm sorry, I tested COVID positive this week, so I'm just staying off. I'm struggling to speak as well. But my father was in the hospital at the same time. I was taking care of him. So, just for me, especially the personal stories, the fact that it happened to someone kind of manifolds the emotion, and the impact is like really real and emotional, and you get drawn into it. I lost many people during COVID, friends, family, and celebrities. Like, there were so many people we lost in COVID. But one thing that was absolutely outstanding and amazing was that the way your father lived his life and what he left as a legacy to you, that shines on your face, in your eyes, and in your voice, that it is a story of loss, but how you are living the life right now. You must be a great person anyway, but your father has contributed a lot how he left. And as a little kid, like, my father was always around, but not really available for us the way he grew up. Like, he meant well, he was always busy to give us a good life, always working. But I always cherish when, we all have great relationships with our mothers, with our first story as well. I was so happy that, these stories are there, and fathers and daughters have this relationship. This is my weak point. When anybody says father, my heart just kind of, cries a little, like, and my father did come back from the hospital, but every single day I fear for his life. But having said that, I have taken an initiative to build my relationship with my father more than before. And I love the story because of the father-daughter relationship. And even if, like, I'm sorry he passed away, but he still lives through what he taught you. And that's what stories are all about. Like, the stories go on. The characters live in the stories through the people who are telling them. And a great salute to your father. And I'm really, really congratulating you that you're so blessed to have a father like him. And I love the way you told the story, and I know the grief work is so important, but with you, I was like smiling, your smiling face. I was smiling. It was so heartwarming Congratulations. I love the story.
Thank you, Renu. Thank you so much. Means a lot.
June, did you want to say a last word?
I was just going to say there was one point in the story where her father's being wheeled up to intensive care. It's going to stick with me because you were talking about your father's iron shirts. And I was still there with him as a personality. And any of us that have seen our parents in hospital and the indignity of being in that blue gown, and you contrast that so well, it really is going to be an image I'm going to keep when I think about your story.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ramya, and everyone.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you to all my friends who've joined me here. They've all been with me through this, and thank you for holding that space. I just want to thank my friends who joined here to listen to this story. Thank you.